the Caribbean, storm Elsa gained Friday hurricane category as Western Caribbean sea nations started hurricane preparedness. The Argentine State Airlines first flight to China departed from Buenos Aires to get the first batch of 8 million doses of Sinopharm, the Chinese vaccine against COVID-19. The United States has put Turkey on a list of countries suspected of using child soldiers. The country is the first and only North Atlantic Treaty Organization ally to be included in the group. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your host, Gladys Quesada, and now we begin with the news. As of Friday morning, storm Elsa gained hurricane category as the Western Caribbean sea nations started hurricane preparedness. Elsa is producing heavy rainfall across the Windward and the southern Leeward Islands, including Barbados. This rain may lead to isolated flash flooding and mudslides. Also, Martinique, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines are facing tropical storm warnings. Meanwhile, Grenada and its dependencies are under a tropical storm watch, as well as the southern and western coast of Haiti. As of 8:30 a.m. local time, the center for the storm was located some 45 kilometers east-southeast of Barbados. Outer rain bands were expected to impact Puerto Rico on Friday and the Dominican Republic by early Saturday. There is a risk of strong wind and rainfall in Cuba, Jamaica, the Turks and Caicos Islands, and the Bahamas from Sunday and through the next week. And now we move on to other topics. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro summoned collective filed to more than 100 filings of impeachment against him. The latest file, introduced to the lower house of Congress on Wednesday, was supported by lawmakers from different parties, social groups, and lawyers, this time for another corruption scandal involving the purchase of Indian vaccines. Bolsonaro rejected the claims but sacked a health ministry official in charge of procurements. The deal with India's Bharat biotech company was halted on Tuesday, and the next day the health regulator suspended Covaxin's emergency use application. An official, Roberto Ferreira Diaz, had allegedly suggested a bribe of $1 for each dose in negotiating a 400 million vaccine deal. So far, the numerous impeachment requests against the president have gone unheeded.
Together, almost all those who presented impeachment requests from all political positions, left, center-left, right, center-right, everyone who wants and has the goal to free the country of a president who is unable to govern.
It is a question of principles. It is a question of values, of morals, of repudiating the criminal negligence that has led over the 500,000 deaths due to COVID-19.
Meanwhile, the Brazilian Senate is moving forward with other investigations into alleged corruption in the purchase of COVID-19 vaccines by the Jair Bolsonaro government. On Thursday, a representative of the Davari Medical Supply Company, Luis Paulo Domingueri, appeared before the Senate Commission investigating the government's handling of the pandemic. In his statements, Domingueri, who was negotiating the sale of 400 million AstraZeneca vaccine doses, denounced that health ministry officials offered him a bribe of $1 for each dose. These accusations comes following the scandal over the overpriced purchase of vaccines from India. Meanwhile, Brazilian social, political, and trade union movements continue to demand the removal of President Bolsonaro and emergency aid to face the impacts of the pandemic. In Venezuela, face-to-face classes are set to resume in October. The news was announced during the closing ceremony of the Bicentennial Congress of the Venezuelan Federation of University and High School Students this Thursday. The event, which was presided over by President Nicolás Maduro and saw the participation of representatives of different educational areas and institutions of the country, included an account on the proposals developed during the Congress regarding transportation, canteens, scholarships, and students' residences. Maduro informed that in October, with all the biosecurity measures in place, educational activities will be resumed throughout the country. In addition, a pilot plan was announced to collect student travel fares through the Homeland system in 9 states of the country.
I believe that the time has come
taking all the measures regarding vaccination, prevention, control, care and distancing. The time has come to resume face-to-face classes for Venezuelan students in October.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro denounced the visit of the U.S. Southern Command's commander and the head of the CIA to Colombia, stressing that the move is part of the ongoing plot to overthrow the Bolivarian government.
Or denounce it. The Southern Command's commander and the head of the CIA are roaming around, circling around Venezuela, and they are received as heroes in Colombia, in Brazil, to develop plans against you, guys. Stay alert, Venezuela. Stay alert. The entire motherland, and let's always be ready to respond vigorously to any plan of aggression or destabilization against Venezuela.
Uruguay has seen the second increase in fuel prices in 22 days, sparking further condemnation from affected sectors. The Ministry of Industry, Energy and Mining announced the latest measure. A similar hike in prices previously sparked strikes in the transport sector. In addition, the government ratified the policy of reviewing the tariffs on a monthly basis to adjust them according to the international market. The executive order was questioned by the opposition Broad Front coalition, which described the measure as a breach of President Lacalle's post-electoral promise not to increase fuel prices. On Thursday, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador offered a review of his main actions of his administration after 3 years in office. Recent polls revealed that the president has an approval rating of more than 60%, mainly due to his social programs. His supporters claim that this victory represented the collapse of a political model that denied social rights to the Mexican people. Several political organizations have pointed out that the country was governed for years by the neoliberal bipartisanship model characterized by corruption and authoritarianism. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. On Friday, the Argentine state airline's first flight to China departed from Buenos Aires to get the first batch of 8 million doses of Sinopharm, the Chinese vaccine against COVID-19. The batch is the first of 24 million doses purchased by Argentina to the China National Pharmaceutical Group to be delivered through mid-July. The flights are expected in this operation aimed at boosting the government's vaccination campaign with several jabs, including the Russian Sputnik V and Pfizer. Argentina and Russia agreed to jointly manufacture the vaccine, which in Argentina will be called Sputnik Vida or Life. Some 20 of the country's 45 million inhabitants have been inoculated with either one of two doses. The World Health Organization has warned that COVID-19 infection rates have been rising in Africa for the past 6 weeks, as the Delta variant hits and the continent continues to suffer the effects of the hoarding of vaccines by richer nations. The highly contagious Delta variant has been reported in 16 countries, accounting for 97% of samples sequenced in Uganda and 79% in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Oxygen demand in Africa is now 50% higher than at the peak of the first wave a year ago. Meanwhile, African countries continue to suffer from a crippling shortages of COVID-19 vaccine, while rich nations make a show of acts of charity in donated doses, without tackling the fundamental roots of the problems of fair distribution and a waiver of intellectual property rights in order to allow middle-income and developing nations to manufacture their own doses. Only 15 million people, representing just 1.2% of the African population, are fully vaccinated, according to WHO. The Democratic Republic of Congo is in the throes of a third wave of COVID-19, recording significant increases in the number of infections and deaths in recent weeks. According to authorities, the health system is working to contain the spread of the virus, but also fighting against misinformation to create awareness among the population about the benefits of the vaccination. The country, which received vaccines through the COVAX program in March, launched its inoculation campaign 1 month later, after several European countries temporarily suspended use of the AstraZeneca vaccine due to fears over potential side effects. Authorities claim that large numbers of people are still suspicious of the drug and refuse to get vaccinated. And Cuba's regulatory authority has given the go-ahead for pediatric clinical trials using the domestically produced Abdala vaccine. The Center for State Controls of Medicines, Equipment and Medical Devices authorized phase 1 and 2 clinical trials will be conducted to evaluate the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine in children and adolescents using 2 doses. The trial will include almost 600 volunteers between the ages of 3 and 18 and will take place in the central province of Camagüey. The vaccine has shown efficacy of over 92% in adults. Meanwhile, Cuba's Soberano 2 vaccine received authorization for emergency use in Iran. The Pasteur Institute of Iran will make the vaccine in the country under the name Pasteur, within the framework of collaboration agreements signed with the Finlay Vaccine Institute in January. The regulatory authority granted the emergency use authorization based on the results of the clinical trials conducted in Cuba, as well as the phase 3 trials conducted itself. The Syrian people are the victims of an acute economic crisis caused by the terrorist war and the blockade imposed by the United States and its European allies. This situation is being exploited by Washington to carry out its plans against Syria, as condemned by the government and citizens of the Arab nation. We have more details in the following report from our correspondent Hisham Wanos.
Commitment to work, solidarity, dignity, determination and devotion to life and the homeland define the daily efforts of the government and citizens of Syria in the face of a scenario marked by inflation, rising prices, lack of electricity, shortages of fuel, medicines and other basic needs. A difficult situation that Syrians agree is the result of the blockade imposed by Washington to generate popular unrest as a means to push the population into uprising against their government, an attempt to achieve what they have failed to do through the use of terrorism, military intervention and the occupation during the last 10 years of terrorist war imposed on the Arab nation.
The prices of products are very high, as incomes are a limit and not enough to purchase basic goods. Likewise, Syrian citizens suffer from the lack of fuel for heating, transportation and electricity generation, and all this is the result of the blockade imposed by many countries on Syria. But even so, we are confident that the situation will improve and we will advance. Little by little, we can overcome the crisis because during the war, the situation was catastrophic and we have managed to triumph. And now, with work, dedication and solidarity, we can overcome the effect of the blockade and frustrate the evil plans of the United States.
At the same time, Syrians denounce that the United States is using the difficult humanitarian situation as a source of pressure on the United Nations and its Security Council to approve a draft resolution to extend the mechanism for cross-border traffic approved in 2014 for 1 more year, which expires on July the 10th of this year. A mechanism that Russia and China, as well as Syria, stress serves to bring into Syrian soil, without the supervision of Damascus, military and logistical supplies for terrorist groups under the pretext of humanitarian assistance for the Syrian people.
Syria's allies are opposed to the approval of this resolution by the Security Council, so we are confident that pressure from the United States will not be effective, as our allies will defend the sovereignty of Syria, since in this diplomatic battle they are also defending their own sovereignty and their common interest with Syria.
Meanwhile, the official and popular joint efforts continue to overcome the economic crisis that is affecting the country. On Thursday, July the 1st, the Made in Syria Shopping Festival inaugurated its 119th edition in Damascus as part of this effort, an event that seeks to counteract the negative effects of the Western blockade by providing a platform to promote national production and to bring products directly to consumers at affordable prices, without intermediaries, one of many signs of Syria's determination to push ahead in the face of the economic war unleashed by Washington and its allies.
TeleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. The United States has put Turkey in a list of countries suspected of using child soldiers. The country is the first and only North Atlantic Treaty Organization ally to be included in the group. Washington has been long complaining against Turkey's arms purchases from Russia, threatening it with sanctions. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan accused the U.S. to be behind a failed military coup in 2016. The U.S. State Department determined in its 2021 trafficking in persons list that Turkey was providing support to the Sultan Murad division in Syria, a group that has allegedly recruited child soldiers. Countries put on the State Department's list could face regulations on security aid and the commercial licensing of military equipment. But the State Department has not said whether or not Turkey will be restricted. In Eswatini, a small landlocked kingdom surrounded by South Africa and Mozambique, people seem to be fed up with an autocratic monarchy. King Swazi called in the army to suppress protests. Police have been firing tear gas, gunshots, and intimidating with low-altitude helicopter flights. Most of Swatini's 1.3 million inhabitants are subsistence farmers. The country is none of the world's poorest, but they are forced to pay for the king's luxuries, among them 11 palaces from his 15 wives and over 100 children. He recently bought 19 Rolls-Royce and 120 BMW luxury cars for his wives and children. Formerly known as Swaziland, the country lies between South Africa and Mozambique on southern East Africa. Most of its population is ethnic Swazi with a 10% Zulu minority. In Philippines, thousands of people have been evacuated from villages around Taal volcano near the capital Manila. Officials now face another dilemma of ensuring emergency shelters such as schools, buildings, basketball gyms, and even church grounds that will not become epicenters of COVID-19 infections. The alert was raised to 3 on a 5-level scale after Taal volcano blasted a dark gray plume into the sky late Thursday. According to the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, a level 3 means lava is near or at the surface, and activity could lead to hazardous eruptions in weeks. An eruption of Taal last year displaced hundreds of thousands of people and briefly closed Manila's international airport.
Nervous to go to evacuation center, especially with what is happening. There's a pandemic and it's hard to leave the house. There are a lot of people there and we do not know everyone.
In occupied Palestine, hundreds gathered outside the illegal Israeli Eviatar settlement in the West Bank, demanding the implementation of an agreement to vacate the area. On Friday, the settlers had not yet left Eviatar, near the Palestinian city of Nablus, where they are under protection by Israeli troops. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett had reached an agreement with them for a temporary relocation. A group of Jewish families placed trailers and tents in the field, claiming it's their own. Israel's Minister of Defense is evaluating the declaration of Eviatar as state land, which will allow the settlers to establish there permanently. The area is part of the West Bank, occupied by Israel in 1967. United States and other NATO troops left the airbase of Bagram, the largest in Afghanistan after 20 years, and having achieved none of the stated purposes for invading the Asian country. These flights are symbolic. The Bagram Air Base served as a linchpin for U.S.-led operations in Afghanistan. Back in 2002, following the September 11th terrorist attack to the Twin Towers in New York, then-President George Bush vowed to eliminate terrorism by invading Afghanistan. The enemy were Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, both Islamic organizations created and funded by CIA operatives in the 1980s, to overthrow the socialist government of Afghanistan and wipe out Soviet influence there. The strategy was successful, but the monster turned against its own creators. The planes leaving Bagram testified to a costly and bloody period of war for no purpose. The Taliban are thriving, alive, and victorious. Coincidentally, while the U.S. troops were leaving Afghanistan in defeat, the mastermind of the invasion and war criminal Donald Rumsfeld was passing away in the state of New Mexico. This is what he had to say back in 2003.
With President Karzai, have concluded that we're at a point where we clearly have moved from major combat activity to a period of stability and stabilization and reconstruction.
At least 10 people, including several women, were killed in an attack blamed on the Allied Democratic Forces armed group in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Local residents protested the violent killings in the eastern city of Beni and demanded that the police and military provided better protection to the civilian population. Demonstrators even carried one of the victims to the town hall, where the army and police reportedly dispersed them using live ammunition. The region has been mired in conflict for more than a quarter of a century, particularly near the border with Rwanda.
In the course of the operation, the Allied Democratic Force have massacred more than 10 people and burned down some houses as well as causing other damage. This is what we are deploring as a civil society.
And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm your host, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.